Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello everyone, my name is Marcus Williams and I'm here today with special guest author Jennifer Carr. Jennifer lives on a hobby farm in Alabama with her husband Rob. They've been best friends since they were 13. Their awesome daughter Hayes, she's 14, hilarious and beautiful, and a bunch of noisy goats and chickens. It's a fun mess and she wouldn't have it any other way. Before she ventured into the world of book writing, she wore a lot of different hats. She taught high school AP psychology, did some marriage and family counseling, planned weddings, and homeschooled their kiddo, just to name a few. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here. It's kind of weird to be on this side of the mic, but I like it.
Yeah, that's great. And would love to talk about your podcast as well and hopefully spread the word there to those listeners too. So before we jump into your story, I want to read your Two Truths and a Lie and introduce you to our scorekeeper, Steve. So Brock so far is ahead of me, and I've had a couple of chances to catch up, and I've failed every time. So hopefully today is different.
Good luck.
So number 1, my Hogwarts house is Hufflepuff. Number 2, I played softball and hit 5 grand slams in a single season. And number 3, my first career goal was astronaut. All right, so I'll see if by the end of our conversation today, I can figure out which one is the lie.
Okay.
So in some of the other information you sent us, you talked about how you didn't plan or you didn't start out to become an author. So tell us how that all worked for you.
That is a fun story. So I've always loved writing. Writing has always been part of who I was. I mean, there's actually really bad poetry in my attic, like sealed up in an envelope for when I was in middle school. And so it will only see the light of day if my daughter has a vengeance out for me after I have gone on, because I have no plan. I couldn't part with it, but I also couldn't like leave it open to the public's chance of seeing it. So I've always loved writing. I've always been a fan of reading, and I just never really thought it was something you could do as a career. I never realized it was something you could make money doing. It sounds like something that, it's a 1 in a million shot, right? To become a bestseller or anything like that. And so I just never pursued something so creative, if you will. And back in 2021, I woke up one morning, I'd had a dream, and I woke up and I thought, I wonder how that dream was going to end, because I was into it. And I was like, I'm just going to write it down and see what happens. And I'm not even kidding when I say, like, later that afternoon, I had what was probably equivalent to about 4 chapters of what is now my first book. And I said, honey, I think I'm going to write a book. And he was like, that's so great. Go right ahead. I mean, it's like, neither of us had a clue what that really meant. But I was like, I'm really into this story. And so I wrote it, and about 9 months after that, I was publishing it. I learned, I figured out how to hire an editor. I figured out how to get a cover made and all this stuff. And next thing you know, I had a book. And then I thought, I need to see how those characters are doing. And so I wrote another book, and it just kind of spiraled out of control after that.
Yeah. And well, first of all, it's impressive that you remembered your dream enough to even start writing.
So, I was really into it, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it must have been a good one. And then I love how you said you wanted to see how your characters were doing. And because it's like, I don't know, it's hard for someone maybe that doesn't write or pursue something like that to understand that you don't actually know until you start writing. And
that's exactly right.
And your characters will tell you as you're writing, even if you're in, I'd love to hear how your process, but even if you're an outliner or it doesn't matter how you write, it's your characters that really dictate. And once you even if you've outlined it, once you dive into it, they really start telling you how they're feeling and what their desires and what they're wanting and what to do next and all that. So I don't know, is that different for you?
Oh, listen, the characters are where it's at for me. I am a character-driven writer. Like the story happens, right? There's a plot to it. There's, things happen to my characters, but I am there for the characters. That's where like the current series that I'm writing, it started because I heard a song on the radio and the characters were like, hey, that's our song. You need to write our story. And I thought, okay. So yeah, anybody else who's not a writer, they probably think I'm a bit crazy when I'm like, no, the characters tell me what's coming next. And then you become so invested because you do spend so much time with them. And that was how the second book happened. I was like, I need to check just to make sure everybody's on the same page and we're doing okay. And they were fine. And so for now, they're resting where they are. But I do have a third book in that series kind of percolating. So I might go back and revisit just to make sure. Just to make
Yeah.
sure.
So have you started it yet, or is just the ideas are just kind of starting to form?
I started it. So I wrote the first two books of my first series, which is a Christian fiction series and
Uh-huh.
romantic suspense. And I wrote those and thought, okay, I'm done. It's a duology. And so I started working on this other series, which is a new adult contemporary romance. And I've been kind of wrapped up in that series. I've got about 5 books planned. 3 have been written, 3.5 have been written. And so I'm working through that. But while I was working on these books, I kept having this little niggle in the back of my head that said, hey, there's a little bit more that you need to talk about over here. And I was like, oh, I don't have time for this.
You're not done with me yet.
Right. Like, seriously, guys, I promise I'm going to get to you. So I started it. I've probably got about 3 chapters worth just to get me started so that when I do come back to it, I can just pick it up and run with it because I am very close to those characters because they're my first. They'll always be important to me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I started, as I finished a book in my series, I would write the first chapter for the next book to include at the end, kind of as a teaser. And then it's like, okay, I've started this idea now. They've told me where they're going. Now what do I do with it? And
Yeah.
how do I dive into it? So it's interesting that I know what's happening. Like I know at least where they're starting. I have no idea where
Yes.
it's ending, but I know where it's starting.
Yeah.
Um, so do
See, I'm
you
kind
outline
of,
the whole book?
oh, no, 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 no. Outline. What is this outline of which you speak? No, I am not an outliner. I will say that I'm, the first 2 were completely pantsed, like just took
Mhm.
off and was like, because I knew exactly where the story was going to go. Like I knew beginning to end. And then this next series, it became more of a very detailed summary, but I don't outline because I like to think that things are open for change. Like I can change them. But if I
Yeah,
see an outline, I freak out and think that's solid and I can't work with an outline. And
right.
so I just kind of do this word vomit on the page, like 2 pages worth of super detailed information of everything I know that I want to see happen. And then I kind of work around it and move things around. So not technically an outline, but definitely more than just going by the seat of my pants on this one. But there's a lot of information that I have to keep straight throughout the series because there are more characters involved. And so I
Yeah.
think that's why I go that route with this series so far.
So do you know what's going to happen at the end when you start at the
I
beginning?
do. I do. It plays in my head like as soon as the idea comes to me, like when the characters, I heard the song. Let me back up. So the series revolves around a country music reality television show competition, and
Okay.
so I love '90s country. That's where it's at
Yep.
for me. And so I was listening to the radio, and it was Sirius XM because it's got the '90s country music station. And
Yeah.
I was listening, and Brantley Gilbert came on, and it was his song "Fall Into Me," and I started thinking, oh, this is a good song. I haven't heard it in so long. And all of a sudden, the characters popped up and said, "This is our song. Write our story." And immediately it played out in my head from the moment they met to the moment the book ends, and it just kind of happened. So yeah, I know the beginning and I know the end. I just have to connect the two a lot of times. And so it's always exciting though because I get to see them grow and change and then get their
Yeah.
happily ever after. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the '90s country. I was listening
Woo!
to Black Hawk this morning, so I'm
Nice.
right there with you.
Yes. I mean, and it has been, I love it because I have this Spotify playlist that's like all '90s, some early 2000s, but once you get past 2010, I was just like, forget it. I don't,
Yeah, yeah.
they messed it up.
It's just not the same thing.
It's
Not at
not.
all. So at some point, and I don't know how it was for you, you've decided to make your books clean, whether that was a subconscious or conscious or just a natural thing. So how did all that work for you in your decision making to keep it clean?
So, for starters, personal values, mostly, like I mentioned, my first series is Christian fiction. That's because I am a Christian, and that is
Hmm.
that is what kind of drives my work. Also, I want to make sure that my books, my 14-year-old could walk in the room, pick up my book, and sit down with it and enjoy it, at any given
Yeah.
point. I think that there's a lot of stigma around writing anything other than the spicy romance. And here's the thing, like, I'm here to tell you that you can read it on the spectrum just like you do anything else, whether it's violence, whether it's profanity, whether it's spice, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Like, we all have our preferences, but you can read all of them at the same time and be perfectly well-rounded in your reading. And so, yeah, I don't know where the stigma came from that you're not supposed to write clean, if you will, but I'm here for it.
Yeah. So have you found any disadvantage or maybe even an advantage in the marketplace having clean books?
That's an interesting question. I wouldn't say that it's been an advantage per se, and like at the very beginning, because I was marketing in the Christian realm and,
Yeah.
and that
Hmm.
market, and that's also kind of a hard market because you've got your spectrum of Christians too. I had one lady
Right.
who told me that I pushed the envelope with one of my scenes or one of my statements or something. It was a Christian married wife referring to the fact that she had taken a shower with her husband. It didn't show anything. It was just a matter of, it was mentioned. And she was
Yeah.
like, that was a little much for me. And I'm going, you can't make everybody happy. It does not matter. It could
Right.
be squeaky clean and it would still make somebody mad. So I can't say that there's really an advantage or disadvantage either way. You find your people, find your readers, and stick with them, and they'll find you. They'll find your work and they'll say, oh, I can trust this author to write the way I like to read. So
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I will say that marketing in the spicy world, like trying to get those readers to come have a palate cleanser every now and then, that's been kind of interesting, but it's worked.
Yeah. So how do you market yourself then to find those people?
It's really funny. They find me. And I don't really know how it happened. I started making connections. I like to, hey, I'm just going to throw it out there. I know that this isn't like the other books you've talked about on Book Talk, but if you want a good palate cleanser, and that's kind of how I throw it out there. I'm like, it's a palate cleanser because sometimes you can read too much smut. Like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to lie, like that is a thing. People get so bogged down in it. Their brain just needs a moment of
Yeah.
lightness. And so I'm like, I've got this book that I think you would really enjoy. And because if you can find a book that you can dive into the characters and really get invested with the characters, you don't really notice that it's missing anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can totally see that. I mean, there have been times, and romance is not my personal favorite genre or cozy mystery, but there are times when I want it just because I want something lighter and easier and
Mhm.
just that I don't have to worry
Mhm.
about it. I don't
Yes.
have to like be bogged or burdened with heavy stuff.
Yes.
And
And we got enough of that in real life. I mean, I don't want to read
right.
that. Yeah.
Right. And that's not to say that, like you said, that there's not a place for it or you can't like both.
Hmm.
But I think there's a time and a place, and you know your brain, your soul, your spirit, whatever, however you want to
Yes.
say it, knows what it needs and what it
Yes.
wants.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I like the way you put that because it's so true. It is a personal preference, which again, we live in this world where your personal preferences only matter if they match everybody else's.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like, oh, you're going to get judged for it. You know what? I don't care. I've spent 40 years on this earth caring up to the point where I don't anymore.
Right.
My book is for you or it's not.
Right. Right. And I mean, and that's a step as an author that you really, it's hard to get to for a lot of people. It's hard to get to. They want to please everybody. They want to be just loved by everyone. And it just, you can't get there. That's not
Cannot.
realistic.
You cannot. You can be a lovely person. They can be drawn to you and not your work. That's fine too.
Hmm.
I think that you be you, and the people that are meant to read your work will find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find, I know in romance, there's some very specific vocabulary and rules and language on spice levels and the number of chili peppers you put in and all that. So
Yeah.
how did you learn all that and to manage it?
Honestly, I don't there's not a standard, right? Like my one chili pepper might be somebody else's 4, or
Hmm.
no spice for me might be somebody's 2. It just, like I said, that one person just really thought I had pushed the envelope by making a statement, and I thought,
Yeah.
"Oh, what kind of happy marriage do you have?" Anyway, that's not for me to judge. That's between
Right.
you and him, but I, there's not a standard, and that's really hard. So I kind of set for myself. I was like, PG-13 is as far as it goes, because anything else, it's too much, right? My mom
Hmm.
would never read it, for one, and that's one of those things that I'm still going to respect the fact that they raised me a certain way, and
Yeah.
my faith and my values, they cause me to be a certain way. So PG-13 is as far as it goes, if you were to base it on like a movie rating kind of thing. I don't know what
Right.
that really ranks in chili peppers, simply because yeah. So if I wouldn't let my kid watch it on TV, I'm not going to write it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I find it difficult, especially when using the movie parallel, because there
Yep.
really isn't anything for books. Is
Right.
they're almost trying these rankings are trying to tell us an age, an appropriateness for an age, and what I've found appropriate for my 13-year-old is very different than my
Yes.
friends for their kids. So I would rather just know what's in it rather
Hmm.
than who it's appropriate, who you think it's appropriate for, because that's
That is,
way different.
yes. That is so true, because we're homeschool, we're Christian. Um, and that means something totally different when you go next door to the homeschool Christian home, or when you go next door to just the homeschool home. It is so different. And so we
Yeah.
have learned that just raising our kid, that we parent differently. We're probably a lot stricter than most parents.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, because I think my child will be able to make well-rounded decisions for herself in the future, because of what we've allowed her and not allowed her, and given reason. That's the other thing. Like, you have to give them a
Right.
reason, not just say because I said so. And I'm like, this is why I write like this. These are the books that we allow you to read and don't allow you to read right now. When you're an adult, you can make that decision. Same for movies and all the other media she consumes too.
Right. Right. And it's funny is my kids are yeah, they're all adults now. But that moment, when they're an adult and they're like, all right, I get to do whatever I want now. I'm an adult. And I tell them, yep, you're 18.
Good luck.
And yet they still will still make the decision based on what they learned. That's an awesome moment as a parent.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. It's like I have made it at that point. I could make the bestsellers list and I would not even care, as long as my kid makes the decision that I know will, respect herself and glorify God. If we can get to that, then I've done my job. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an amazing feeling when your kids
Mhm.
are making wise decisions on their own. And my wife always says, "Hey, we just got blessed with good kids. It's not just us." But I hope that we had some influence. I hope that we taught them something, and that
Yes.
they'll be good adults and good people because of what they learned and how they were raised.
Oh yeah. Well,
So,
that if you didn't have an influence, it wouldn't, like, I was not born to just grow up and be a good, happy, nice person. Somebody had to teach
mhm.
me to be that way, and
Yeah,
that's not our natural bent. So I think we had some influence as parents over our kids.
yeah, yeah. I do too. So, when you're um, when you're writing, do you find it more difficult to paint accurate imagery or pictures with clean language? Would it be easier to just put the stuff in there, or do you think just because it's innate to you that it doesn't make a difference?
I mean, here's the thing. I could write the fire out of it. I could write some spice if I wanted to. I could use the words if I wanted to, because you hear them, you see it. It's everywhere. It's the world we live in.
Hmm.
I don't want to. And so, I think there's a lot to be said that if you can come up with and paint a scene with words that are not vulgar, with words that are not profane, if you can paint a scene without um actions that are vulgar or obscene, then I think you're a better writer than most, because you had to think a little outside the box. If you think about it, you had to paint this picture to get somebody's imagination to a certain point without actually telling them they got to that certain point. And so I think, um, I'm not saying that I'm a fantastic, amazing, wonderful writer, but I'm a good writer, because
Hmm.
I can take you there without having to tell you where you're going, if that makes sense. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I don't struggle with it, but again, it's not part of my everyday vernacular or ideology. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, so you self-published, right? Or indie
Hmm.
published?
Did.
How was that process for you, or why did you make that decision?
Uh, I started because I didn't know better. Like you write a book and you think, oh, now I have to find somebody to publish my book. That's I didn't know self-publishing was a thing. And so I started doing all this research. I have this, editor that I, spent way too much on, but she did a great job. And so I was like, okay, next step, I got to find an agent. Okay. So I start the querying process and I hate that. I hate that with a passion. That's rough. I probably sent about 97 queries and got 96 and a half rejections. And then I finally got the final half rejection from the same for that last one that just held on. They're like, can we have a full manuscript? I was like, absolutely. And then, 3 months later, they were like, pass. And I was like, I think you already knew
Uh,
that. I think you already. And so I was like, okay, so now what do I do? And I'm like, what do you do, Google, when nobody wants to publish your book? And it's like, have you considered self-publishing? And I'm like, no, but I have now. And so we
mhm.
just kind of ran with it. I thought, all right, let's learn how to do this. And the first book, it was not a bestseller because I didn't know what I was doing. The second book, also not a bestseller, but it was easier than the first. And then
Yeah.
the third, it just gets easier over time. You learn from your mistakes, you find ways to market and network and communicate. And I think in the last 3 years, the whole indie author scene is exploding because it has become a lot less taboo, maybe.
Yeah.
You don't, and I think traditional publishing has also kind of kicked itself in the foot because I mean it's made some decisions that are like, all right, well if you don't write exactly what we tell you to write, and it's like, well, I don't want to read exactly what you tell them to write,
Right.
and the readers are going to rebel, and so now we have indie authors who can write what they want and sell it when they want to who they want. So
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if the publisher told Hemingway what he was supposed to write, or Mark Twain
seriously,
what he was supposed to
oh
write?
my
If
gosh.
if their decisions were 100% market, this will make us money. You have to have this. I mean, we wouldn't have half the literature we have today if
Nope.
they controlled the artistic process.
Oh my gosh. And like you have to meet this agenda. You have to make sure that you're fitting into this box. And I'm thinking that is not art, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
art. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I find the same issue with mine when I try to even put a genre or category on it. It's a little bit of this and it's a little bit of that. And it's just the story I wanted to tell. And why does it have to be in this category? And,
Yes. Well, and that's another thing when you talk about clean romance and that kind of thing. People get really their hackles rise when you say clean romance. And they're like, oh, well, what I read's not dirty. And I'm like, you know what? What we mean is sweet or wholesome, closed door, fade to black, all these other things. But Amazon's like,
yeah.
clean. It's like, oh, okay, great, thanks so much. That just immediately puts a target on me to be avoided. And then, like you said, like I'm new adult, but only because young adult won't take me, and adult is too mature. And so it's like I'm new adult. Well, is that a real thing? Amazon says yes, but it didn't a year ago. So
Right. Right. Yeah. If it wasn't a year ago, why is it now?
all of a sudden, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think that's the stigma with clean, is that you think the opposite means we're saying yours is dirty,
Yeah.
and that's not. It's just it's the when you try to think of another word that encapsulates what we're trying to say. I
Mm-hmm.
when we were naming the podcast, we struggled because like, yeah, we don't really like that word, but
Yep.
there isn't another one out there, because like the Amazon category, clean and wholesome. I mean, to me, those are two different things
Yeah.
still.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Right, because I mean, if you were to put my contemporary romance series, I wouldn't put it in a church library only because, um, like in the book that comes out in October, it is implied that the couple lives together, right? Well, that's not something that would happen in a Christian romance. You can't put that in a Christian romance,
right,
and the conservative Christian romance, and so but it's still wholesome because you're not seeing anything on the page, and so it's kind of one of those things that makes you go, this is the hand I'm being dealt, and we're going to work
right.
with it the best we can and try to change that stigma that is stuck to us right now.
Yeah. So when you're looking for books to read, how do you do your research to find books that are clean?
Um, so I'm a romance junkie, and
Hmm.
so most I would say probably 99% of what I read is some form of romance. The oh my goodness, it's called Closed Door Romance. She's doing a fantastic job over on Instagram and Facebook to broaden the horizons. And you want to talk about any and every clean and closed door romance out there. She's probably got it or is about to have it on her list. And she has her own basically online library of
Cool.
suggestions. And so looking for people like that, for listening to podcasts like yours and, saying there are other options out there, but also you start marketing in that world and you start connecting
Hmm.
with the authors who write the same thing you do, and so that also helps a little bit, but I'll read anything once and we'll see, good or
Yeah.
bad.
So are your books on audiobook yet?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking, because it allows me to tell you that no, but I do have a Kickstarter in the works to turn my books into audiobooks, which, because it's expensive to have an
Hmm.
actual human narrator read your books. And I have no desire to sit and read my own book and record it, even though it's been suggested. Why don't you do it? Because I don't want to. That's the answer. I don't.
That's a
That's a lot of
good
words.
reason.
I don't. I don't want to. Do I want to pay out the wazoo for it? No, I don't want to do that either. But so I started a Kickstarter to crowdfund turning my books into audiobooks. We'll see. It's about 10% funded and it's got 45 days to go. So maybe we'll get there. Here's to hoping.
Yeah. So how do you, I know Kickstarter has a very, like you can just throw something on there and nothing will happen.
Anything. Yeah.
Um, so what are you doing to try to make it successful?
I'm talking about it anywhere and everywhere. I've put it out on TikTok. I've done Facebook. I've done a Facebook ad. We'll see. That's one of the main things they suggest is doing. Well, I don't know. I hate Facebook ads anyway because they're so, you just don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah.
I scroll past them most of the time, unless they really catch my eye. So we'll see. Maybe I'll catch somebody's eye. But talking about it at every turn and just sharing it, also backing other Kickstarters is a good way to get your name out there. And so find causes that you're really interested in. Yeah, I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive because you're spending money, but at the same time, I want somebody else to be successful, even if I can't be. So that's where I started anyway. We'll see.
Yeah. So you're shooting for a human voice. Did you consider AI or what are your
I
thoughts there?
never considered AI. I don't get me wrong. I love AI. It's a great tool. Chat GPT is one of my best friends because sometimes I don't feel like coming up with social media posts. Just saying. And so my Chat GPT will be like, "How's this?" And I'm like, "It's a good start," and then I'll fix it. And so,
Yeah.
but I never considered AI because it's not there yet. It's the quality is not there. You can tell when it's a
Yeah.
human voice. There's a difference. It feels different when you're listening to it, and so no, I never considered AI for it. It is
Yeah.
cheaper
I
though.
tried it on on a short story and
Mm-mm.
yeah, just I wanted to see experiment
Yeah.
the
Oh
new
yeah.
tech and see what it was like, and it was exactly what I expected. Just like you said, it just doesn't.
It's so
There's no
close.
soul.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
that's it. That's it. It's so close, but it's so far away. I love somebody suggested, well, you can just let Alexa read it from the Amazon app or the Kindle app. And I'm like, yes, you can. But let me tell you how many times she'll say like read instead of read or lead instead of led or,
hmm,
um, yeah, I'm just like, it pulls you from the story when you hear things like that. And so, no, it's not worth it. Thank you, though, for
yeah.
the suggestion.
And in that short story, I had some biblical names, and they weren't the most
Oh,
common ones, right? I pulled some that were not super common, but
good for
I
you.
figured I figured Bible, AI should know the Bible or names from the Bible, and no, it mispronounced all of them.
So I in my book that came out in February fall, when you're ready, there's a sentence where it's dress up day at school. She's dressed like a cowgirl, and she walks downstairs. She tips her hat and says, "Howdy, Paul," and just being facetious with her dad. And
Yeah.
Alexa read it as "Howdy, Pennsylvania," because it was PA period. And I was just like, "Come on,
Really?
Alexa, seriously." Yeah, we had a good time with that.
Well, it's like I always complain. AI knows everything in the world, has all the knowledge in the world, yet voice to text on my phone never
Mm.
gets it right. It's like, why aren't we programming these things to do the stuff that actually is helpful?
Thank you very much. You go do my laundry, do my chores, do all the other things, and then let me write my books. I mean, that's a fair trade, but no, it's gonna it's all fun.
Yeah. So on your little homestead, we've got goats and chickens on ours as well. Do you guys
Nice.
do a garden and stuff too, or?
We have tried gardening. We are not gardeners, apparently. As much as we would love to be gardeners, we are not. My husband works full time and he has a
Uh,
commute, and I hate dirt. And so it kind of really it doesn't work out time wise. Um, we started a garden and we had a fairly successful one actually during COVID, but he was working from home and so he could be out
right.
there morning, noon, and night in between meetings and that kind of thing. And so it was a lovely thought. And one day, once I make millions selling books and I retire him early, um, just throwing that out there. But when that happens, then maybe we'll go back to gardening. But for now, we love our animals, and we really would like to breed the goats so that we can have baby goats and goat milk. But we're not quite there yet. They're still
Yeah.
a little young, but yeah.
Well, gardening is one of the times where it's kind of mindless in a way, pulling weeds and whatever. So it's a time where I think of stories, and where my story develops is when I'm out working in the garden.
Mm.
So it's my grandpa was an amazing gardener, and I'll never be as good as him, but we try. We do our best.
That's my father-in-law. He looks at a plant and it grows, and I'm just like, how did you do that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. So if you could go back in time and give advice to when you first started writing, what would you tell yourself?
Ooh, like the first time I started writing, or when I wrote my first book?
Either that would have helped you get to where you are today, I guess.
I think I probably, starting back when I was in college, like when I first started college, you take these tests. I don't know if you've ever taken the assessments that tell you what you're supposed to be. I went to
Hmm.
our state career center and was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Like, what should I do? And so I took this assessment, and it came back and it said you should be either a writer, an actor, or a teacher. And I was like, okay, so writing and acting is like that. Nobody's ever actually going to be successful doing. You don't just say I'm going to be an actor and
Right.
do that,
Right.
or a writer. And so I was like, okay, I'll be a teacher. And I did. I taught AP psychology in high school for a little while, and I don't like parents. The kids are cool, the parents
That's
less
fair.
than. And so, I was just like,
That's very
we're
fair.
done here. Yeah, we're good. And so I was like, golly, I don't know. So I would go back and tell my younger self that, yeah, if you're good at it and it's something you love doing, then do whatever it takes to make that your career. Do what it takes to make that more than just something you do on the side. Like, because it's clearly a thing, but when you're 17, what do you know? So going
Right.
back and saying, invest in that, make that the path you take, then yeah, that would be the advice I'd go back and tell myself.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's because a lot of people get the advice, follow your passion, which is great, but you have to follow it in a way where you have a plan to make it something that works
Yeah.
for you or
Oh
your
yeah.
family. And there's a big difference in just doing something you like and actually creating a career out of something you like.
Yes, absolutely. And you have to start, you can't make excuses. When you want something to be more than just a hobby, you have to do it with everything you've got. And it's really easy to make those excuses. It's not something that happens to everybody. It's a one in a million shot. Why would it ever be me? How do you know it's not going to be you if you just walk away from it and say, I'm good?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never try it, you never do it. And writing too is you can only get better at writing by writing.
Yes.
There's times where I wish I could go back to the first book and tweak it a little bit more.
I mean, you can, but just for yourself, really. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true too. Also, understand that just because you love doing it and an assessment says you should be a writer, you're going to suck at it the first time you try. Like your first
Hmm.
draft is going to be terrible. It just
Yeah.
is. That's part of the game. You get better. It gets better.
Yeah, I took those. I think I broke those assessments because every time I took it, it was something completely different. Like, is there like
Yeah.
multiple? Do I have multiple personalities going on here, or what? Because
Just you're a mood taker. You take the test in different moods and it just changes everything. I do not want to do this today, so I will not be that.
right, I'm like I was honest. I swear I was honest, but it apparently
For
was honest for
today.
today. Right.
That's funny.
So, do you have any other clean authors out there that you would recommend people looking?
Oh, goodness gracious. I would have pulled up my library sooner and told you this. I'm actually kind of obsessed with the series by Cassie Beebe, Cassie Beebe. But it centers on a reality dating show, and I love reality television as
Hmm.
trashy as it is. I don't watch it anymore. I used to watch it way more, but I love the idea of reality TV. And so it's based on, she kind of centers on that. And so I love her series. I'm working through it right now. Falling for Sun, Marriage Material. The one I just read was Falling for Sunshine, but it's the Marriage Material series. So yeah, I like her stuff right now. Is where I am.
Cool. So tell us about your podcasts and where we can find them.
Oh, sure. So the podcast I started right after I published my first book is called Connected Conversations for Creatives. And it's literally a place where I bring in creatives of all backgrounds, all backgrounds. They may write the spiciest of spice, or they may just be painters, or I've had movie directors. It's been a fantastic wild ride. We just started season 3 actually June 12th. And so pretty fantastic. It went international. I've had several international guests, and that's been pretty exciting. But
Sweet.
it's so fun. I had a girl from Germany. I've had a couple from the UK. I had a lady from Israel. I mean, it's just been Amsterdam. It's been fun. It's been really fun just to kind of see creatives from all over the world talk about how they got there, where their passion came from, some of the struggles they faced and how they pushed through them.
Hmm.
That's been a real exciting thing. Just wrapped up recording the last episode for season 3 that started. It's been a wild ride. And then my other podcast that I co-host is called The Author's Dilemma, and it is me and 2 other authors who are indie authors, and we met through my podcast. I had them on as guests, and we just kind of all vibed, and so we started our own podcast to kind of just chat about dilemmas that authors face, especially in the self-published world, or things like that. And so we kind of focus on the indie author more. That one's a
Hmm.
live podcast, which is really different from what I'm used to, but it's good. We have a good time. But all of it's on Spotify or Apple, or wherever you find YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts.
Cool. So for aspiring authors, what would be advice that you would give them when they're just starting out? Say they woke up this morning and had a dream and wanted to start writing. What advice would you give them?
Um, oh gosh, I want to say them all. I've got like
Yeah.
this list that just ticked off in my head. I guess the first one would be, don't doubt the fact that you can do it, because you can do it. You clearly have a story to tell, and therefore tell the story. You're going to face every doubt possible. You're going to say, I'm not good enough. My writing is not, technical enough. I'm not creative enough. I don't have the funds or whatever. No, you write the story, and then you create you a community of people, and you lean on them, and you just let other people invest in you while you invest in them, and it becomes this team effort of, I'm going to help you do this. And yeah, is it going to cost you something? Yeah, time, energy, money, it's going to cost you something, but in the end it will be completely worthwhile. You just have to be willing to make that investment at the beginning. Write the story.
That's great advice. And I think it's important for them to know too that there are people who wrote their first book in 6 months, and there are people who
Yeah.
took 10 years.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they finished that book and got it done. And no
That's
matter,
it.
and sometimes it was life that got in the way, and
It happens.
marriage, kids, career, and that's fine. That
Yeah.
story is still there to tell.
Yeah, it's still valid. I mean, your story is your story, and you have it for a reason. the world would be very sad if they didn't know your story.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So we're about out of time, so I need to get back to your
That went by
two truths
fast.
and a
Let's do it.
lie. I
Okay.
know it does, doesn't it? All right. So remind everyone, my Hogwarts house is Hufflepuff. 2, I played softball and hit 5 grand slams in a single season. And 3, my first career goal was astronaut. Well, we didn't talk about Harry Potter, softball, or NASA. So
Good
this is
luck.
going to be a shot in the dark here. I mean, whew, I'm going to say, and this really is just a guess because I mean, I could talk myself into or out of any of these. I'm going to say number 2, I played softball and hit 5 grand slams is the lie.
That is incorrect. I actually one season had 5 grand slams, and they gave me the ball at the end of the season with my name, Grand Slammer, tattooed onto that
Nice.
ball. Yep.
So which one is the lie?
I am a Ravenclaw, baby.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Hufflepuff. No, I married one and birthed one, but I am a Ravenclaw. It is what
But
it
you're
is.
the Ravenclaw. Okay. All right. All right. Well, I didn't fall further behind. We're static where we're at. So missed another
Sorry.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Oh, well.
That was a fun game, though. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show. And for everyone watching or listening, please subscribe, follow, share, check out Jennifer's books and her podcast as well. Get the word out there. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for listening. And we'll catch you next time on the Clean Library Podcast.